Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Monday, September 20th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Amanda Montell, linguist and host of the Sounds Like a Cult podcast. On her book, Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism. Also on the program today, Democratic Senate leadership pretending once again that the parliamentarian has absolute power, this time over her quashing of immigration reforms. Meanwhile, conservative Democrats attack the reconciliation bill. Manchin wants a delay. Sinema wants to quash the prescription drug discounts. Over the weekend, progressives reiterate we will not vote for the bipartisan bill without a reconciliation bill up for a vote as well. Speaking of voting, Canadians go to the polls today. The United States admits that its drone strike in Kabul killed 10 civilians, including 7 children, but offers no disciplinary action. Union tentatively approves a deal to end the 6-week Nabisco strike. FDA panel recommends a Pfizer booster for 65 and over. Meanwhile, Pfizer says its study shows safety for kids between 5 and 11 for vaccines. Biden administration still using Title 42 now to expel thousands of Haitians who have gathered in Texas. France recalls its U.S. and Australian ambassadors over the U.S.-Australia nuclear sub-deal because France had its own, or thought they did, their own $66 billion sub-deal with Australia. Lastly, the UN says that the current national pledges for reduction of CO2 have us on a catastrophic pathway. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thanks for joining us. Joining us, of course, as she does every day, Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma.
Hello, Sam. Yes, I'm here every day. You're here not every
I knew as soon as I was going to say that, you were going to bring that up. Mondays are always tough. They're
Right.
tough. I feel a little bit rusty. And then, of course, like you've got to set the tone for the week.
Right. Or I thought you were going to be like, oh, I have a snarky co-host who puts me down on the reg.
Well, no, that may be the case, but Monday, it just feels like it's all pent up over the weekend. You got to get it out.
Yeah, no, understand. It takes me a little while to get back in the swing of talking to a microphone.
Right. Yeah, there you go. So, let's get right into this. I am of a couple of different minds of the Pentagon conceding what was pretty clear from reporting that I think first came from the New York Times at least a week ago. Speaking of the drone attack on Kabul as the United States was attempting their withdrawal of not only their forces, but all of the Americans in Afghanistan and folks who had been working with Americans over the past 20 years. In that drone strike, which the military had insisted was successful in taking out or preempting an attack on American forces, they killed 10 people, 7 of whom were children, and some reports suggest that it was basically an aid worker coming home to his family. I have not ever seen an admission like this, I think, for a long time.
Yeah, and the Trump administration, for that matter, rolled back the transparency provisions about drone strikes, so we don't even have a clear picture of what happened for the 4 years.
Certainly during the Trump years, and we also know that they rolled back the sort of any type of... they made it easier to kill civilians. Now, with that said, this is not unique to Biden or Trump. Obama also really was the one who really ramped up the drone strikes. Now, it was just a question of like the technology really essentially appearing in time for that to happen. Let's play this clip, and we'll talk about why I'm a little bit ambivalent about this admission, although good.
Better admission than non-admission, but the act is still what it is.
Right.
Good afternoon. I'm here to brief the results of the investigation I directed following the report of civilian casualties from our strike in Kabul on 29 August. Having thoroughly reviewed the findings of the investigation and the supporting analysis by interagency partners, I am now convinced that as many as 10 civilians, including up to 7 children, were tragically killed in that strike. Moreover, we now assess that it is unlikely that the vehicle and those who died were associated with ISIS-K or were a direct threat to U.S. forces. I offer my profound condolences to the family and friends of those who were killed. This strike was taken in the earnest belief that it would prevent an imminent threat to our forces and the evacuees at the airport. But it was a mistake, and I offer my sincere apology. As the combatant commander, I am fully responsible for this strike and this tragic outcome.
Now, what we didn't do was to end that clip just before he offered his resignation.
Or here, take me and prosecute me.
I mean, there is at this point been no indication that anyone is even going to get a demerit as a function of this mistake. Now, I understand that they're really, really apologetic.
He broke out the profound condolences, Sam.
Right, and there's that was probably the punishment, and I am going to be held to account, and that's why I have to come out and say this. Now, it's a good thing that they're admitting this. It would have been very hard based upon all of the reporting on the ground, but there's a couple things that you should be aware of that seem fairly obvious, but do need to be said. The vast majority of drone strikes that take place are not at the epicenter of the news of the day, where you have, I don't know how many foreign reporters on the ground there to immediately challenge the military's perspective. The military, if they could make this type of mistake in Kabul, imagine the lack of resources that they have and the mistakes that they would make outside of Kabul. And I'm not just talking about in Afghanistan. We could be saying this about Yemen. We could be saying this about, Somalia. We could be saying this about Pakistan. We could be saying this about many, many countries. So it is far more likely that this episode was not the anomaly, but is probably generally more apt to be what the reality is of our drone strike program, that we end up killing more civilians than we do enemy combatants in the final analysis, and that the military is under virtually no pressure to come clean. And I would also add that I think even if we were to trust the military to reassess, right, to do their own investigation, say, we got it wrong, I think the only reason why we're hearing about it in this instance, and that's assuming that they actually do come to the proper to an actual conclusion in other instances. The reason why we're hearing about it in this instance is because Joe Biden is under attack for withdrawing from Afghanistan. And my suspicion is that when they investigated this and you already had these reports out there and there was, a lot of on the ground in the moment reporting by the New York Times, Joe Biden was like, you're going out there and you're saying this because this is a reason why we should be leaving Afghanistan. Now, that doesn't mean that Joe Biden's not doing the same thing in some other country. More than likely that we are. But in this instance, things just aligned. So people should understand the idea that we're hearing about this is the only thing that's unique about this situation.
Right. And also, of course, as you point out, that there were eyes on it to this degree. I'm sure they would still call this precision strike, right? Even though they're just using cell phone data and there's no way to actually fundamentally know if it's precise in any way. The norm is probably that we kill the wrong people more often than not. And we were talking a little bit about this before the show. We saw a tweet from a Fox News reporter saying that the administration or that the military stands by the intelligence. We don't know if that's actually the quote. That was his characterization. And like you say, it's all an effort to make Biden look bad. So take that for what you will. But operationally, they do still stand by the intelligence because this doesn't cause a wholesale reevaluation of the drone program in and of itself.
Of course.
So they'll move on from this. We'll move forward. If they actually were serious and wanted to offer, what kind of condolences was it? The most
profound
condolences. What would be profound is to end the drone program.
I mean, let's put it this way. If we don't hear about the punishments that come from this abject failure, can you imagine how often we don't even hear about the abject failures? Right? I mean, this is their showpiece.
Yeah, because they just imply that, okay, we killed some civilians, but also maybe there was some intelligence. We got a good bad guy in there too. And
right.
Then, yeah.
Yes, perhaps another wholesale reevaluation needs to be done on the nature of intelligence and how intelligent intelligence can be, and what that leads to in terms of state-sponsored murder.
Right. I mean, the bottom line is this doesn't work. It doesn't work. It didn't work in Afghanistan for 20 years. It didn't work. And the thing that drives it forward is just cash. That's basically it. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking to Amanda Montell. She's a linguist and host of the Sounds Like a Cult podcast. Her latest book, Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism. But first, we have some sponsors today. One is from Stitch Fix. And I guess I jumped the gun a little bit in getting that sweater. I don't know what I was thinking. It's still hot here, but I got a great... it's like a cardigan, but a zip-up cardigan.
Oh,
sort of like baseball style.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Off the top of my
cubby.
head, I don't remember which sweaters you own.
Now, you know your closet well, right? I presume.
Yes.
Right? But what does it sound like?
My closet?
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing.
Does it whisper your taste, or does it scream your taste?
It screams.
Yeah.
That
Well,
it's
with Stitch Fix
messy.
Freestyle, a shop that evolves alongside your taste, your closet will scream absolutely you without actually screaming. This is they're introducing Stitch Fix Freestyle. It's a shop built just for you. Stitch Fix Freestyle is your trusted style destination where you can discover and instantly buy curated items based on your style, likes, and lifestyle. Whether you're looking for a brand you love or try a new one, at Stitch Fix Freestyle, you can shop hundreds of brands personalized to your size and fit. They got styles for workouts, to workwear, lounging, night out on the town. Stitch Fix Freestyle has clothes for any occasion. Plus, there's no subscription required, and they offer free shipping, returns, and exchanges. I got to say, this is the way that I've been using Stitch Fix. They hadn't quite developed this whole thing where you just go in, they give you more things, but I've been periodically going in and doing my likes, thumbs up or thumbs down on stuff. And so they've been presenting me with stuff that is like getting increasingly more like what I wear. Now, there's still enough like variant so that I don't get in a rut, which I think if anybody who's watched me over the years knows that I'm in a massive clothing rut. And I have been for 25 years. Although I will say this, I don't know if people have noticed this, but I wear a lot less like checks on my shirts. That's basically just because of what we were doing with Zoom, and it was
video software.
Yeah, it was video software. But I'm branched out on sweaters that reintroduced me to 5-pocket jeans. It's been great. Get started today by filling out your style quiz at stitchfix.com/majority. That's stitchfix.com/majority to try Stitch Fix Freestyle. stitchfix.com/majority. Folks, you know that one of the things that people like, and apparently customers also like, is stuff that's on demand. Customers have grown to expect a simpler way to do business. Doesn't matter what your product is. That's why more than 90,000 local businesses of all size have turned to Podium. Doesn't matter whether you have one location or 1,000, Podium can help you stay ahead. What is Podium? It is a service that makes doing business as easy as sending a text. So all your employees can text from a single inbox, offering a smoother experience for your customers. Doesn't matter whether you're answering questions, collecting reviews, scheduling appointments and deliveries, or dealing with payment collection. All you have to do is just send a text. Car dealerships. They're selling more cars by offering text messaging. One dealer apparently sold a $50,000 truck in 4 text messages. What is that, like an F-250? No, it's like an F-350. Retailers are increasing their revenue by allowing customers to shop via text message. Many people still want to shop from home. Well, Podium knows of a jeweler that just sold a $5,000 ring with a few text messages and even coordinated curbside pickup with Podium. Today's customers expect on-demand everything, even from local businesses. You got to check this out. Stay ahead of the competition with Podium. They have free plans for growing businesses, plus all the power growing businesses need to scale. Get started for free today at podium.com/majority. That's podium.com/majority. Okay, want to welcome to the program Amanda Montell. She's a linguist and host of Sounds Like a Cult podcast. Her second book is out, Cultish. It's the language of fanaticism. Amanda, welcome to the show. I'm here with Emma Vigeland.
Thank you so much for having me.
This feels really particularly timely because it feels like everything has become culty these days. And you use the term cultish. Let's just start there for a second. What does that mean? Like, why cultish? And give us like sort of what this, I guess, matter of degree scale is.
Sure. Well, when I started writing this project, I was hoping that my personal understanding of the word cult would become more definitive, more succinct. But in fact, the opposite was the case. I found that this word is so subjective and has become so sensationalized and oftentimes so filled with judgment that it's really not specific enough to determine what actual dangers are on the table when you're discussing any particular group. Scholars who discuss new religious movements, alternative religions, and the sociology of them don't even really use the word cult, at least not in formal settings, for these reasons. They've tried to come up with lists of criteria distinguishing a cult from a better accepted religion or another kind of mainstream social group, and they've never been able to agree. So for this reason, I try to either be very specific with my language and call something a fringe religion, a destructive new religion, if that's the case, or I'll sort of hedge and call it cultish. And so in the book, I talk about this wide range of cultish groups, some of which are really nefarious and some of which are fairly harmless, but all of these groups use these techniques of cultish language to influence us in ways that we can't even see.
What like, I mean, just for the sake of this conversation, like what, how do we distinguish between nefarious and harmless? Like, you know, like do we have a timeline on this, or is it, you know, I mean, how do we? I mean, that's really sort of the problem, right? I mean, that's the delineation between cults and religion, or
there really is no delineation, because you can go down that list of criteria that people have tried to describe. Okay, us versus them mentality, ends justify the means philosophy, charismatic power, abusive leaders, supernatural beliefs. You can go down that list, and then there are plenty of groups that have been or could be called cults that won't check off most of the boxes, and yet you'll have plenty of mainstream groups, traditional religions, government bodies, Silicon Valley companies that really, really do. So it's quite challenging, and you have to sort of pay more attention to what's going on than simply labeling a group a cult.
All right. So with that said, I guess what we're looking at is a process of really sort of some measure of indoctrination, and whether it leads to something that is nefarious or causes people problems or not is almost sort of secondary to, I think, what you've written here. With that said, before we get into sort of like the push aspects, what are there targets or individuals who are more or less susceptible to this process of, I don't know, indoctrination with language?
Yeah, I believed the lore before I started writing this book that those who wind up in cults are desperate, intellectually deficient, disturbed in some way. But what I found interviewing source after source, survivors of some of the most notorious cults of all time, including Jonestown and Heaven's Gate, was that they were incredibly bright, service-oriented. They had this grand vision for a better world. And their fatal flaw was really not desperation. It was this overabundance of optimism. It was this faith that solutions to the world's most urgent problems could be found. And by affiliating with this group, with this confident guru or charismatic leader, that they could be a part of that change. So it was a combination of certain amounts of privilege. If you don't have money to spare, if you don't have lots of friends and connections, you're probably not going to be very attractive to a cult. So the type of person most susceptible to these sorts of groups was really the opposite to what I thought. I thought myself, I'm so skeptical, I am such a cynic. I would never find myself involved with a cultish group. But when I think about it, I've been in my fair share of toxic one-on-one relationships, which are really just cults of one. I've been in my fair share of really strange parasocial relationships with social media gurus myself. So really the susceptible, vulnerable person is not who you might think.
But to what extent does, I don't know, the overwhelming amount of information these days, the lack of clarity, I guess, just sort of modernity as it exists today, also sort of, I guess, make that attractive. I mean, it's one thing to feel like you're optimistic that there's a silver bullet to this, but it also may be that you are overwhelmed with what you perceive as all the problems or questions.
That's true. So, right, we can backtrack even further. Cults tend to peak in the United States during times of cultural turbulence, when the institutions that are supposed to provide us with support, government, the healthcare system, religion, traditional religion that is, seem to be failing us. And so you're right, we're overwhelmed by the onslaught of tumult. And so we often find that we want to turn to alternative groups to fill those voids of community, connection, purpose, meaning, ritual. And sometimes those alternative groups end up being net positive, and sometimes they end up being really destructive. So I think the human craving for sort of closure and clarity and comfort during times of crisis is really deeply ingrained and not at all a bad thing. It's simply when people exploit it, that's when it becomes a bad thing.
And you talk about the, I think, influence of people who are more, the targeting of people who don't have ties and are a bit more atomized. And I'd imagine that increases during, this era where we all are so isolated in our own ways. And like, there seems to be this specific targeting of suburban women or suburbanites in general to cult-like things. I mean, I don't know if it's a pyramid scheme or a cult in general, but there are things that feel cult-ish, as you write, or as you say, that seem to be attracting a growing number of people just through online marketplaces and discourse.
Yeah, sure. So people who are vulnerable in one way or another, who do feel like the system is failing them, certainly are a bit more vulnerable to these groups. And yes, sort of white suburban mom types tend to be the target for a lot of these groups, from conspirituality to multi-level marketing. And there's definitely some overlap there in terms of the Venn diagram. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people have been reaching out to me to comment on the recent Amazon Prime docuseries Lula Rich. And it's interesting, I write about MLMs in my book, and there's so much to unpack there. But yeah, I mean, MLMs we think of as scams, but they're not just your average scams. They're much cultier than that. They are these life-consuming organizations that have pervasive missionary ideologies, founding leaders that members come to worship on the level of a spiritual leader, who are promising not just financial benefits, but benefits to your very life purpose and afterlife. A lot of MLMs are Christian or Mormon affiliated. That is no accident. They really appeal to people who were brought up under some version of the prosperity gospel, the idea that monetary blessings, #blessings, and heavenly blessings are inherently connected, that God helps those who help themselves, and that, you know, meritocracy is real. And if you truly work hard enough, it doesn't matter if the system is predatory and doomed, like, you will achieve not only success, but enlightenment. That is an incredibly compelling message to all Americans, really, but especially, you know, certain people who are locked out of the dignified labor market, including homemakers, white suburban women.
Right. I mean, and then it also allows them in some of these MLMs a way to, or the prospect of not passive income, which is not true, like they're still working, but an ability to juggle being a mother while also being a part of this larger community where they may not feel connected, have to stay at home, and then, you know, they can make money for their family and exist in capitalism while still having the job of being a mom.
Absolutely. So the multi-level marketing industry has always riffed on whatever female empowerment buzzwords were trendy at the time. So in the 40s, Tupperware was promised to be the best thing that happened to women since they got the vote. And now MLMs like LuLaRoe and Arbonne and Young Living are promised to be the priceless opportunity to be part of an organic, holistic movement, to be the girl boss you really are, to be a mompreneur, to be a CEO, to work part-time from home, making a full-time living without having to leave your kids. So I don't want to say programs, but we are conditioned heavily to resonate with this certain commodified feminist message. At least a certain slice of us are.
Yeah, I mean, capitalism is driving a lot of that, right? I mean, in that narrow field, I mean, all of it.
Yeah. I mean, we're all brought up with the Protestant capitalist ethic that started hundreds of years ago in Europe. We're brought up to value individualism, ambition, self-improvement, progress, meritocracy. The stuff is deeply embedded, even if you don't consider yourself Protestant or religious in that way, even if you don't consider yourself particularly entrepreneurial.
All right, let's go back to this process in which people are pulled in, and it is all centered around. Well, I mean, is it? Well, I don't know. This is like one of those egg chicken things, but is this process exclusively, or at least primarily, a function of language, or is that you're a linguist and so you're looking at that aspect of it?
I mean, that's my argument. Certainly without language, you cannot have ideology, you cannot have beliefs, you cannot have community. Without language, you cannot have cults. My argument is that, you know, in the media, you tend to hear one pretty flimsy explanation for why people end up in cults: brainwashing. They were brainwashed, they were mind controlled. But brainwashing is nothing but a metaphor. It's not a real or testable phenomenon. It doesn't meet the criteria of the scientific method. You can't prove that brainwashing doesn't exist. And people tend to take language for granted. We grow up with axioms like sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt you and such. And we don't stop to appreciate the really material value that it has to control people, to influence people in ways that they can't even see. So my argument is really to shed a light on these linguistic techniques that are influencing you in ways that have nothing to do with a rural commune, a shaved head, a white robe, the classic cult things.
Talk about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I was unfamiliar with that hypothesis. What is that?
Sure. Yeah.
My mispronunciation of it.
No, that's perfect. Well done. Yeah, this is something you learn about in linguistics. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis talks about the relationship between language and thought. So while language does not determine thought, you can have thoughts for which there is no linguistic label. It does influence thought. So this relates to the concept of cult language, because we think about brainwashing in terms of like, oh, these people were once, individuals with their own minds, and then all of a sudden a cult leader got in there and completely wiped their brains clean. But you can't convince someone to believe something that they on no level want to believe. You can only coax them to believe slightly more and more and more radical versions of what they're already open to. And certainly if you want to push back, even if you grow up in a cult and their language is all you know, if you have a certain skepticism inside of you or a certain questioning, if you don't want to believe in what sounds to be malarkey, you can push back even if you don't have language. And I interviewed some people who grew up from birth in cults like the Children of God, who just always had this inkling, even though there was a euphemism, a piece of loaded language, an us-them label, a thought terminating cliche to shut them down, they still could feel in their bones that something was wrong.
I mean, so is that dynamic, does that dynamic just, is it you're increasing the intensity or decreasing the intensity of a belief, or does it have the ability to shift a belief, or is it that we have, walking around, I have 5 alternative beliefs, essentially, and I'm operating on one belief system, but I have 5 others. And if it's triggered, that dial can be turned up, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, social science of belief. It's so interesting. I mean, I could have written this book for 10 more years at least. I think, we grow up because of our background and our lifestyles and all the circumstances that make us who we are. We are open to certain beliefs, and I think we're just completely closed off to others. But something that is universally true is that we crave connection, purpose, meaning, ritual, community. Did I say that already? Like, these are the profoundly human things. And depending on nature versus nurture, I don't know, like all of the combination of things that make us unique, we might be amenable to a certain belief system rather than another. For example, Heaven's Gate, the UFO millenarian cult that claimed 39 people's lives in the late 90s. That cult arose during the digital technology revolution, when all of a sudden, computers were providing new and interesting answers to humanity's oldest questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Heaven's Gate rhetoric would not land now very well. It would sound super dated. Talk of the kitchen being the Nutri-Lab and the laundry room being the Fiber Lab. And when you're in the mansion, you're in craft. And when you're out of the mansion, you're out of craft. Like, that feels very dated now. Back then, it felt really resonant. And so, yeah, I mean, cults will resonate with certain people depending on their background, depending on the time. It's really complex.
All right. And so one more aspect of this, and then I want to get into more about the language. Is there a dynamic where there's a certain, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, intensity level or fanaticism that is transferable? In other words, like, I've seen research that shows like the biggest converts from one religion to another are the ones who are looking for, from a generic standpoint, the same type of structure, maybe, but they're just changing what those beliefs are. In other words, are there a finite number of people who are susceptible to cults? They don't necessarily have to be in cults, but they are susceptible because or going down a certain path because there could be an intensity about yoga at one point, but then it becomes about spaceships, or then it becomes about just going to church.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a finite number of people. This is a complicated question because, again, it depends on your definition of the word cult. I mean, there would be people that would argue that I'm in a cult because I voted for Joe Biden and because I used to be vegan. Like, there is so much subjectivity there, like what even is a cult? But yeah, I think that there are certain people who, again, because of their background and some like incredibly complex amalgam of factors, are more susceptible to certain metaphysical ideas. I mean, there have been studies done on the connection between intelligence and certain metaphysical beliefs at education levels. Gender might have an effect on whether or not you're more likely to believe in New Age beliefs or conspiratorial beliefs, which are growing to be more and more of the same thing every day. But yeah, and I think, you know, we have certain patterns. So it's almost like the process of someone going from one abusive relationship to another. Like, I spoke to a really fascinating source in the book who was a survivor of Jonestown, the most famous, infamous cult tragedy of all time. What did she do? She went and joined another cult right away, which just so happened to be the cult where my dad spent his teenage years against his will, which is a huge inspiration for the book. That group was called Synanon. So she just really was not willing to give up on the idea that, again, solutions to these urgent problems in the world, classism, racism, sexism, could be found in a commune. And yeah, after the two destructive cult experiences, she finally gave up on that. But yeah, it's complicated, of course.
Well, I guess twice. That's not, I mean, and we should say, your book points out that drinking the Kool-Aid, you know, it comes from Jonestown.
It comes from Jonestown, and it wasn't even Kool-Aid. It was,
you know, that growing up, I thought it was Kool-Aid.
What was it?
It was just bug juice.
It was a shelf brand. It was called Flavor Aid, and Kool-Aid has just become a genericized trademark, like when you call all adhesive bandages Band-Aids, even though there are other brands.
Wow.
That's right. That's the same with Kleenex. Kool-Aid must have really enjoyed that.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about the taxonomy of what you call cultish language, right? There is a redefinition of existing words, and we were joking beforehand that maybe we would bring you on as being like, this is the first time she's coming on as a knowledge giver.
Welcome to the mothership.
Yeah, exactly. But explain that concept and what the value to creating a cult is.
Yeah. So when you take existing language that we've grown up our whole lives using, and you slowly and deliberately twist the meaning of it so that you've shed the old meaning and infused it with a new cult meaning, that can, first of all, help psychologically separate you from the rest of the world, because they're all using language to mean one thing and now you're using it to mean another. So it creates that us-them dichotomy. It's also a form of gaslighting when you deliberately convince someone that the language they've always known does not mean what you think it means. It actually means something else. We as humans are innately averse to those high levels of internal conflict, so we feel the need to default to the nearest confidently speaking authority figure to tell us what we need to do to feel safe. And then those words with their new cult-specific meanings become emotionally charged, so they can be used as threats. I have an example early in the book where I talk about how a former member of the group, the Happy, Healthy, Holy organization, 3HO, they're the Kundalini Yogis. They own Yogi tea, fun fact. You can find it in any grocery store. They, isn't that frightening? They had this term old soul to, you know, an average American English speaker is a compliment. It means someone who's wise beyond their years. But in 3HO, it was this threat. It was this menacing thing. It meant someone who'd reincarnated life after life after life, and they could never get it right. So you could control someone's behavior by threatening. You're going to be an old soul. You're going to be on a low vibration, Piscean consciousness. These things sound sort of ridiculous to outsiders, but to those who, on the inside who've been conditioned that this is what old soul means, it becomes really powerful.
Talk about the notion of like the in language. I mean, what that does. I mean, I feel like that is one of those things where it's like, well, that you see that in almost everything on some level, right? I mean, the legal profession, people who watch this show for an extended period of time, there's some shorthands that we use. I mean, how much of it is that, and how much of it is like, and I guess also, how self-consciously does a cult leadership or cultish leadership deploy that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is a difference between cultish language and language that's there in any given field to communicate more effectively. So my parents are research scientists. When they talk at the dinner table, I have no idea what they're saying because they're using like in-group jargon. But that language, those acronyms and special terms, they're there to make language clearer. They're there to make it more succinct. All of that stuff like could not be said in plain English when they're talking about parts of cells and things I don't know about. But cultish language has special in-group terms, but they're not there to make language clearer and more succinct and easier. They're there to make meaning cloudier. They're there to obscure truths. The language is really just there to divide people into an us and a them, to create hierarchies, to warp your perspective or to cause you to mistrust your own reality. So yeah, the language can be definitely more nefarious in a cult scenario than perhaps on your show, but I don't really know. And cult leaders do tend to be pretty deliberate about it. Like, who doesn't love the feeling of speaking a secret code language? We all remember what it felt like on the playground to learn to speak Pig Latin. You instantly felt not only intellectually, but morally superior to all the kids who couldn't speak it. We love that feeling of exclusivity and intellectual superiority.
But doesn't that to some extent exist, like even in the context of what you're talking about? I'm just thinking about like I'm most familiar with, you know, sort of legalese, and it may not be deployed for those reasons, although I sometimes wonder. But it does create like a us them. It certainly creates a sense of morals and intellectual superiority.
Totally.
It also reframes questions in a very limited and space. I mean, I don't know if, you know, how much of that is deliberate or if, how much, but it certainly has all those impacts though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not super familiar with legalese. I would have to look into it more, but the more you talk about it, the more I think it might have some elements of cultish language. Again, these things fall along a spectrum, so it's not like Jonestown or nothing. Maybe it is like a little bit closer to the more dangerous end of the spectrum than, say, I don't know, Quakers, but who knows? I mean, I used to work in digital media for a beauty magazine, and certainly there was a lot of extremely cultish corporate BS jargon tossed around just to fill those who knew how to use it or thought they knew how to use it with a sense of elitism and to make everyone else feel like they weren't cool and they weren't on the inside. And it was also used as a form of social control, you know, like the language didn't say anything that couldn't be said in plain English, but if you used it, it showed that you were a team player, that you were a conformist, that you deserved promotions, that you deserved more opportunities. And if you didn't use it, if you refused, if you were an iconoclast, that meant that you were a troublemaker and maybe you couldn't be trusted. So there's definitely that intention behind it as well, I think.
Well, that's like what fascinates me so much about, I guess, we can talk a little bit more about QAnon because that's in the news so often. I mean, I find the appeal to one's own sense of narcissism and desire to possess a secret knowledge that elevates oneself ahead of the rest of the general population to be a really tantalizing concept. You've touched on it a bit here, but bringing it into more specific concepts that we've seen, like that seems to be the addictive quality of something like Q.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, those cravings for exclusive knowledge really spike during times of cultural crisis. So there are a lot of questions in our world right now that don't have simple answers to. And when a confident person, or in the case of Q, many different people. I mean, on social media, there are countless cultish leaders just because of influencers and social media. Like now there's really a cult for everyone. But yeah, when someone is confidently stating that they have a simple answer to a complex question, we're really inclined to want to sign up for that, especially with QAnon in the early days, releasing those breadcrumbs or Q drops. It's like gambling, you know, it's like pulling the slots. It's a shot of dopamine every time you look for a new clue, a new term, because QAnon really weaponizes language in a really interesting way. And now the conspirituality community has done that as well. So yeah, it's really preying on our own chemicals that we make in our own body, our own like stress chemicals and happiness chemicals to keep us in, since, you know, QAnon isn't on a rural commune, it's just online.
Talk about thought terminating cliches. What are those?
Sure. So this is one of the most interesting elements of cultish language. It's the sort of thing where once you understand what it is, you won't be able to unhear it. So thought terminating cliche, this was a term that was coined in the early 60s by a psychologist named Robert J. Lifton. And it describes a sort of stock expression that's easily memorized, easily repeated, and aimed at shutting down independent thinking or questioning. So questioning, dissent, scrutiny is obviously the enemy to any cultish group that wants to hide any wrinkles in their logic, or, you know, just wants to be able to assert unquestioned power at every turn. And so anytime anyone wants to push back or ask a question or poke holes, you're going to need to have a roster of these stock sayings to shut them down. So in Nexium, for example, if folks are familiar with that group, a thought terminating cliche could come in the form of dismissing a valid concern or anxiety as a limiting belief, or don't let yourself be ruled by fear. Maybe you should sit with that. In QAnon groups and conspirituality groups, classic thought terminating cliche is, well, I did my research, or do your research. Research, of course, to them does not involve peer-reviewed studies or what we would consider, what most of us would consider like actual research, but of course, going down a confirmation bias-filled rabbit hole, revealing, you know, fantasy answers for questions that feel unanswerable. So yeah, the thought terminating cliches are everywhere, and they also show up in our everyday lives. Things like, well, boys will be boys, or it's all in God's plan.
That do your research has been deployed quite a bit lately in terms of vaccinations.
Oh yes. And what is research? Like, what is this research that they're pointing you towards? I mean, it's very
on your phone, right? Just check Facebook and see what Facebook is saying about it.
Exactly. It's a very convenient thing to do. And thought terminating cliches are super compelling because they alleviate cognitive dissonance, or that uncomfortable discord when you hold two conflicting ideas in your mind at the same time. It's like, I want to believe in this person who seems very confident and nice and they care about me, but it seems like poppycock. What do I do? Do your research. Okay. All right. I just haven't done the research yet. All right. Or it's just a way to shut someone down so that the conversation will end and that person will go away. So yeah, I mean, anything legitimate will stand up to scrutiny, will stand up to dialogue. Dialogue is of course difficult to have on social media sometimes. But yeah, do your research. Classic QAnon to conspirituality, thought terminating cliche.
You also talk about like sort of names that, or I guess like nouns that create insider-outsider dynamic. Is that seems similar to the idea of redefining words, or does that have a different sort of? Does that create a different effect?
Yeah, you're doing that exact same thing of creating that us-them dichotomy. I mean, most religions will give people monastic names. You have a confirmation name, or, you know, a bat mitzvah name, your Hebrew name, whatever. But in certain circumstances, it can be used really purposefully to make someone shed their identity, to leave behind everything they knew in the past, to leave behind everyone on the outside of the group, and move forward with this new identity. Again, in that group 3HO that I mentioned, everybody was assigned a name by a name giver who used tantric numerology to come up with a person's new name. Everybody had the same last name. In Heaven's Gate, everybody shed their old name and was either given or chose a name for themselves, but it always had the same suffix, which was Odi. And some people think that was a sort of combination of the two leaders whose cult names were T and Do. So your name might be Chakoti or Andoni or Silvodi. And it sounds silly, but it really was incredibly symbolic of these people's new identities and shedding of the old. And it was doing real religious work.
Does that also work in the terms of like, you know, I mean, I'm thinking about it in the context of like online political discourse and maybe offline political discourse as well. But there has been like a rise in the idea of having to, you know, sort of subcategories of political identification that just seem to have maybe have always existed on some level, these subcategories, but they certainly feel like they've proliferated. Is that part of it too?
I don't talk about this in my book or in Cultish very much, but yes, I think, we as human beings really crave taxonomy. We crave labels, and labels can be really powerful in legitimizing an experience, whether that experience already had a name or not. What comes to mind is cancel culture. Like, there were already names for canceling someone before we had the term cancel. There was accountability, there was bullying, there was public shame. We already had that term or those terms, but then the word canceled became almost this like piece of loaded language that everybody should now fear. So yeah, I think we really just inherently crave a sort of categorization system to help us understand the world and ourselves.
I mean, the cancel thing seems also odd too, because it's so entertainment based, right? I mean, it really is just based upon the idea of your favorite program not being on anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I make the argument all the time that I think cancel culture is more about catharsis than actual change, but that's a different conversation.
So, yes.
Well, yes. Yeah. Sure.
So what is there to be done about this? I mean, is there I guess, like, and why would I do something about it? I mean, like honestly, is it just a way of trying to provide people with the ability to get a sense of like, how deep am I getting into something? Or is it just sort of a way to examine, how some form of manipulation is going on?
Yeah, it's all of those things. I mean, the reason why I didn't just talk about Jonestown, Heaven's Gate, and Scientology in the book is because I'm inviting us all to consider that cultish influence isn't simply found in those cinematic cult-like places that evoke Midsommar or whatever. It's all around us, and none of us are above it. And I've even, I've been humbled while writing the book as someone who considers themselves very cult phobic, very skeptical. It's an invitation to consider the cultish influence that you're under, whether it's on social media or in your startup or in your fitness studio, not to be wary of it, not to be paranoid, but just to make sure that when you return from whatever space you're engaging in, that you're able to strip off their linguistic uniform, if you will, and go back to an identity that is more complex than any one given ideology, group, guru. And it's also an exercise in empathy. I mean, I thought those same things before writing this book, that people who wind up in cults are desperate, disturbed, totally different from me. But the fact that we're all susceptible to this type of influence, and that doesn't make you an idiot, it just makes you human and someone who craves answers, I think can really help heal a lot of connections.
Is there any sort of like comprehensive history of this, like to contextualize like where we are in the, I don't know, the modern history as to the use of this language or the susceptibility to this language? Because it feels like I don't know that, 50 years from now, this era will seem unique, but the combination of like the development of social media, the social upheaval that is happening that may or may not actually be a part of that, seems like we are uniquely situated for this type of language and impulse to increase. And also, I would say probably the diminishment of religion, which I think sort of like sopped up some of the impulse for this stuff.
Absolutely. So I talk about all of these factors and the history of it in part 1 of the book. I think this time in history will be considered unique, just as the 60s and 70s were considered unique in terms of all of the new religious movements that emerged during that time, which some scholars refer to as the 4th Great Awakening. Maybe this is the 5th Great Awakening. I mean, there tend to be these periods in history, again, where these factors will come in that leave people feeling existentially unmoored. And this is when cult language has its strongest effect. I talk about it in the book, and oh man, I looked elsewhere. I looked for sources that would neatly package the history so that I could, pilfer from that. But unfortunately, there is no one single source that goes into super, super nitty gritty detail about it all. But it is overviewed in part 1 of Cultish.
Well, we're a political show, so I mean, I think we're at least I'm primarily, or not primarily, but a little bit more interested in just like the political ramifications of this as well, because I feel maybe like in terms of this being an inflection point in history, cult language and cult-like thinking being this prominent of a part of our politics, I mean, I don't know. It seems unique to me.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a part of our politics. I touch on that a bit in the book. I thought I barely touched on it at all. I touched on it enough that there are some people who are triggered. But yeah, I think that political parties and candidates absolutely make use of this cultish language and the various techniques. They have to.
Then we've used it as a handbook in order to indoctrinate people and to sell more merch.
Yes.
So
right.
Much appreciated. Amanda Montell, the book sounds, excuse me, I should say the podcast sounds like a cult, and it's cultish, the language of fanaticism. We've got links to both at majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick respite. That's what we call it, instead of a break.
Right.
I know. I'm so excited about that.
Commissaries are only like cult language.
Well,
I guess that's true.
The commissary is where we drink the Kool-Aid.
Right. People understand.
Right.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. Just want to play this next clip because, one, I really appreciate the sentiment, and I know Mike. He's a good guy, but this is he is an Iraq war vet, and he attended a George W. Bush speaking event. I think it was in Beverly Hills, California, on Sunday, and he took the opportunity to speak to George Bush, and I think this is actually, we should have more of this.
And the president's got a lot of really smart people at his disposal. And I used them, my dad used them, and he would say, you're smart people. It was awesome to have him alive. And Mother, of course, was around too. And she had
Mr. Bush, when are you going to apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied? You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat. You sent me to Iraq. You sent me to Iraq in 2003. My friends are dead. Joshua Castile. You killed people. You lied. You lied about WMD. A million Iraqis are dead because you lied. My friends are dead because you lied. You need to apologize! Apologize! Apologize!
Are you with this gentleman? No. No.
You know, one of the things
Is she with this gentleman? Did she come in with him or is she with you?
Oh my God.
Yeah. The
so
idea.
You'd behave? Who said that on stage?
I don't know who provided that, but the reformation of George W. Bush at this time. There was I saw a report that Bush and Obama and Clinton were getting together with their respective first wives to welcome Afghan refugees here, and it just the Reformation project. There is a direct line to allowing our politicians to get away with what ultimately ends up being mass murder,
war crimes,
and war crimes, lying us into war, and the sort of just sweeping away of, by any numbers, you want it to be 200,000 like the Defense Department, or 1 million by most of the reputable accounting of the deaths of Iraqi civilians. it begins to eat away at a country. And, you know, to hail George Bush, to have him being able to go out and now being just the guy who gives candies to first ladies is a real problem, I think, on our history. So,
and credit to Mike for focusing on the 1 million Iraqis. Estimates go back and forth, but that's one of them, and not just United States troops, which is the only thing that's dominant in our politics when we talk about this illegal war. And you can check out Empire Files, which is a show Mike produces with Abby Martin, who is it's good stuff. All right, folks, if you're watching us on Peacock, we will say goodbye to you and see you tomorrow. And for the rest of you, we see you here now. Hello. Hi. What's up? Welcome to Monday. We're going to head into the fun half of the program. We got plenty more to talk about. And try and catch you up on the latest of what's happening with the reconciliation bill. Also, the debt limit is coming closer. We will get to all of that. But before we do, I want to remind you, this show relies on you for its fuel, for keep on chugging. If you want to help this show thrive and survive, become a member today by going to jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only support the first half of the show, but you also get extra content virtually every day. Whoa. Yeah, I know. It's nuts. So check it out. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, don't forget, JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code Majority. Get 10% off. And we've got our AM Quickie. Head to majority.fm. Scroll down to the bottom. Put your email in there. You'll get an email blast every morning. Short one gets you some of the top stories and some of the stories that you probably would miss. So check that out. Don't forget, Nomi Show, youtube.com/The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. There we go. I think that's right. I can't believe I can't get that. And I also know my brain on it. Modernity. I know I can't even do modernity either. You know what I found out the other day is my really big, not speaking but spelling brain gulf is I can't spell restaurant. Yeah. Do you have one of those? Oh my God. Anything with an IE. I have no idea where the U goes. Anything with an IE. I know the rule. I before E except after C. I can't spell peace. I can't spell friends. I can't spell, honestly, I write it and I can never do it. Those are pretty easy ones. Yeah, I mean, restaurant. I don't know what the friends thing is about. That may be. That's I before E. Yeah, I know it. I know, but I can't. When I start to write it, I'm always like friend.
The problem with the I before E thing is there's just enough exceptions that you have to really guard against it. When
I'm correcting Saul's spelling, I feel like 40% of the time I'm going yeah, I know that doesn't make any sense. That's just the way it is.
Well, yeah, that's English for you.
And then I say, and that's English. Matt Lech.
Okay, Brett Weinstein.
Yeah, you can't stop saying Brett Weinstein.
That's how you pronounce it.
It's not Weinstein?
No, it's Weinstein.
You say Harvey Weinstein too.
It is Harvey Weinstein.
Harvey Weinstein.
I think I say Harvey Weinstein. But it's the Weinsteins because they're just like that other guy whose name rhymes with them.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot. That's only what I do to Sam.
But yeah, I don't feel too on the spot. But on the spot for Left Reckoning this weekend, we had Victor Poggi talking about Bolsonaro's apology for trying to do a coup at the Supreme Court and how his far right people are handling that. And then also coming up, we have David Gerard. He's a no-coiner. We're going to talk crap about Bitcoin a little bit. But also, we're going to talk about blockchain, how that's also bad, and how smart contracts are dumb, and all this stuff is stupid. And it's just thinly veiled boosterism for a speculative asset controlled by rich people. So that is this week. Patreon.com/leftreckoning for the Patreon show, and go subscribe to the YouTube channel.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920 is the number. see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just wanna degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on! Fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday! Happy birthday to me, Jew boy!
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on! Come on! Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
Well,
We are back, ladies and gentlemen.
getting so good at that timing.
There you go. We're back. 646-257-3920 is the number, of course. And you can IM the show by getting the app at majorityapp.com. Let's go right to the phones. 215, I believe that is Pennsylvania, if I am not mistaken.
It's me.
Mindy!
Hi, Sam. How are you?
Heard you really, you have a story to share with us.
Yes.
Thank you for reading my DM. I appreciate it.
Yes. No worries. You're lucky I'm on Twitter when I'm at my job.
Yeah, that's interesting. But I mean,
I know. Yeah, she's. No. I'm really glad you were talking about that cult thing because it's a real thing. I mean, you can be like my daughter married. My daughter was a normal 28-year-old girl. She got involved with a family, and they're like kind of like gypsies, and they're very insular. They don't want anybody around. They 3 boys in the family. The mother had 3 boys.
I don't know what you mean by gypsies, but
what? Well,
yeah.
they're like well, okay. So, all right. So I'll tell you the gypsy part in a minute. So she had 3 boys, and each one of her boys, she picked out wives for them. 2 of the wives don't have family. Like there's no family. Their families are dead. My daughter met this guy, and he was adamant about her, and I guess the mother let the son marry my daughter,
Right.
and then she got rid of us. She like completely brainwashed, gaslighted.
So you don't talk to your daughter at all anymore?
No, my daughter was my best, one of my best friends, 28-year-old daughter. We did everything together. We never had a problem. And it was subtle. The brainwashing can happen to anybody. It's like, if you would tell me this time last year that you would never talk to your daughter again, I would tell you you're full of shit and I give you $1 million. But it's subtle. Like, and now that we're looking back on it, it's subtle. Like, they started to work on her 3 years ago, and it was like a slow burn. It was like cut by 100 knots, whatever that saying is. And it was a slow burn, and they just totally got her to believe that whatever they wanted her to believe, that our family was horrible, that we were making her cry, that we were mean to her, that we were abusive, and my daughter just went for it. And what I meant by the family gypsies is they have no money, and the three boys
Mindy,
were living in a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom, and she couldn't wait to get her boys out. And I found out later that she stole the mother. The mother stole the mother stole money from the husband's mother, put the house in foreclosure, remortgaged it, stole like $1 million from the sister to live on. And my daughter has a nice little inheritance, and we begged her to sign a prenup. She wouldn't, and now she's back married to him. In December, the mother called me and said, "You're going to lose your daughter." They blocked us on everything, all social media, the whole entire family, completely blocked. We have no way to get to her unless we drive over to her house. They made her move there, and that's it. I have no contact with my daughter after 28 years.
Mindy,
nobody does in my family.
Well, that's a horrible story. I feel horribly for you. I would just also I gotta just say, like, the term gypsy in that way is I mean, it's rude. You don't want to say that. Don't use that term. They're just, you could say they're ne'er-do-wells or something. Yeah. So better, huh?
They're thieves.
They're thieves, but that's why. Okay, so
sorry, I didn't. I'm old.
You're just
I know.
the
I
share,
understand.
the
I understand. But
song.
we're almost the same age, Mindy. So let's not. But that's horrible about your daughter. I'm so sorry that.
No, but the point I'm trying to make is that when she was talking about, like, you think you have to be like these Trump people and all these people that like follow a leader, that follow Trump. You don't have to be a total moron to do this. I mean, my daughter, she comes from a good family. She has an amazing job. I mean, she's brightly educated. You don't have to be. I think it's those kind of people sometimes are the ones that can actually fall into this. Like, you don't have to be a total idiot to get involved with this. So when she was talking, it's all about brainwashing and grooming, and really everybody is susceptible to it.
When you look back in retrospect, what were the first signs that you see now of like her moving down this path? I mean, first off, it's super creepy that the mother-in-law is like calling you saying you've lost your daughter. I mean,
yeah, right, like reveling in it.
I'll send you the text, Emma. She called me and then she sent me a text. You mean the signs, the warning signs?
Yeah.
Daughter would get off the phone with me, and my son-in-law to be would text me and say, "Why did you make her cry?" Like, and I would be, "What the fuck are you talking about?" I mean, like, we send heart emojis after we hang up on the phone. Like, they were grooming her. Like, they started to, like, they wouldn't merge the family dinners together, like, for the Jewish holiday. They were Jewish, and they wouldn't merge the dinners. They would tell me they were coming for dinner, and then they would cancel, like, at 4 o'clock and say somebody broke a leg.
Oh, weird.
Like, they wouldn't merge the dinners together. They, They just kind of kept lying to her about me. Like she got married in February, and she called me after the wedding. That was the last time I spoke to her. She called me after the wedding, and she thanked me for being on good behavior at the wedding. That was at 11 in the morning. By 3 o'clock, I ruined her wedding. I screwed everybody up. The mother started to put all the monkeys out, and they were all. She told everybody what to say. So by 2 o'clock, I will ruin the wedding. And then they just say they say she doesn't look to her brother. Her brother, who was her best friend, she doesn't talk to her brother. Brother's getting married next month, and she's not coming to the wedding. She was in the wedding, and she's not coming to the wedding.
That's awful.
Awful. Sorry.
Crazy shit, but it's not about my story. What I just wanted to say to you is anybody is susceptible to this. It's not a type of person. There is no type of person that can fall into this. It's anybody. You could be anybody. And this can happen to you if the person that wants to do this to you is good enough at it and has enough support. So when she talked about the cult, this is a real thing. I mean, it's not it could never happen to me. It's a real thing.
Mm. All right. Well, appreciate the call, Mindy. Hang in there. Update us. If there's anything.
How's everyone else? Everyone else good?
I think so.
I think I'm all right. Yeah. We're good.
I kind of dropped out of politics a little bit because this whole thing's just consuming. I do a lot of reading about.
I understand.
It's the era.
Yeah.
This happens, but.
And I can't stand Biden, so the whole thing.
I understand.
All right. All right. Well, have a good day. But I listen every day. I just don't call in. I just listen to you every day.
All right. Well, I appreciate hearing from you, Mindy. Hang in there. Hopefully,
but the
hopefully something will turn.
Real.
Thanks, Mindy.
All right.
I'm good with it. Bye.
Oy. Cult is real. Sam, thank you for showcasing how entitled anti-vaxxers have become. I observed something, though, when you talk about vaccine hesitancy. You and Emma continue to share your opinions without looking at data or survey of people who are hesitant. How many percentage of people are concerned due to impact at work? I can tell you right now that I have. It's about how many concerned impact work, how many are uneducated or unaware that it's free. Without statistics, your opinions are not actionable and don't give any insights. I mean, look, the numbers are all over the place. The latest one I saw was that it was basically there were 30 million people, this obviously they extrapolate these numbers from polls, that fall into the concerned about impact at work, or not so much that it was unaware that it was free, but it was more just weren't sure or just didn't want to engage with the hassle. There was a slightly smaller amount that fell into just general hesitancy. I don't know what that means, or politically oriented. But you would imagine that it being expensive and work being an issue would be for a greater number of people because there are more people in that pool to begin with. So you would imagine if you were just to look across the board generically, that there are more people who are low income who are not getting vaccinated because there are more people who are of low income in this country. I mean, defined that way. Your left testicle. Sam, please be more discerning about your callers. Gypsy, seriously, there are much more appropriate ways to discuss a solution to the Romani problem. People are horrible. But I really do think that data is outdated, frankly, because we need to see what the implications are of the latest mandate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen a sign that that's moving because of the mandate.
I mean, the mandate requires companies to give time off to their employees. Now, it's big companies, but you would imagine there would be some change there. So I think we're increasingly getting to that point where it's going to be more, political than not, or at least, more political than not. Which is not to say that there isn't a sizable amount of people who are going to be hesitancy. There's the Apparently, Pfizer did a study of 5 to 11-year-olds. I think the sample size is like 2,500 or so. They used a dosage that was about a third the size of what they were giving adults. They found it effective in creating antibodies. They found no myocarditis. Am I saying that right?
I have no idea.
Which is like the sort of the heart swelling that there's been some reports of in some limited amount of kids. It's unclear whether that's really a function of the vaccine, but there was none in that sample size. So we could be a couple of months away from children 5 to 11 being vaccinated. Again, you know, it's so hard to assess what the dangers are. The number of children who have died, and I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, but you know, I think under the age of 15 is somewhere around 400 and change over the past year and a half. And I think that's probably a third or a quarter of the number who die annually in drownings in this country. But at the same time, also a report I saw the other day of pediatric diabetes doctors have been noticing almost like a doubling of pediatric diabetes. Partly, they don't know. They're not sure. Some of them, there's some suspicion that maybe the kids are less active because they're not going to school, you know, broadly speaking. But there's also now some belief that COVID might impact, like, the cells in the pancreas. I mean, and I say that only because, like...
Novel virus, folks.
Right. Novel virus. And, like, the idea that everybody is so sure... Well, not everybody. There are people who get out there who are looking at the existing data, and there is... and are basically saying this is, you know, we know everything there is to know about the dangers of COVID.
Right.
Now, by the same token, you could argue, do we know everything there is to know about the potential dangers of a vaccine, you know, 6 months out, a year out? What we do know is that the introduction of the vaccine has not brought about the deaths of 650,000 people in the past 9 months. We know that for a fact. We know for a fact that it has not brought about the deaths of even 6,500 people. We know that for a fact. And we do know COVID has resulted in the deaths of over 650,000 people, which is not even to mention, like, the other impacts it's having. And, you know, it's conceivable that long COVID only happens, you know, 10% of the time. But how many cases are we talking now? Millions. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult for people to sort of, like, walk through that. I don't even know what got me on that conversation. But
it was because we got an IM about
the vax hasn't.
Oh, so, yeah. Right. Calling from an 801 area code. Who's this?
This is Spencer from Utah.
Spencer from Utah. What's on your mind?
To keep on with the vaccine hesitancy, I just wanted to bring up something about thalidomide. People on Facebook and things like that, the right-wingers in my feed, have been sharing things where they mention thalidomide and the horrible effects of that medical catastrophe, and then put something of a tagline like, go ahead and trust the FDA, they know what they're talking about. And we know that's BS, but I just wanted to give it a really quick debunk. In the early 1950s, thalidomide was first synthesized in Switzerland. A German company then purchased the patent for it. By the end of the 1950s, about a dozen companies were producing thalidomide and selling it in about 3 dozen countries under as many different names. Those European companies attempted to bring thalidomide to the U.S. through the private market. However, our private industry quietly rejected thalidomide and their offers for unknown reasons for decades. I won't talk about that. However, the FDA, they rejected thalidomide 5 times. Dr. Frances Kelsey was the person put in charge of that, and she rejected it every single time. In 1961, she was given a medal by John F. Kennedy, and then thereafter, we also had some changes in our policies that we still have today that include things like proving efficacy of a drug when you submit it to the FDA. So again, I just wanted to really quickly debunk thalidomide was never FDA approved. It actually failed 5 times to be approved. If anything, the FDA protected us. About 10,000 people were affected worldwide by thalidomide, but only about 50 or even less were affected in the United States.
Was it only 50 people in this country?
That were quote unquote thalidomide babies, flipper babies, whatever you want to call them.
Oh, geez. I had no idea that the numbers were that small. So how did the drug get disseminated? Was it just that it was bought like sort of black market or imported from Europe?
In the United States, when Europe attempted to bring it into our market, about 20,000 doses were put through testing. And maybe it's something for Matt to look into, but again, that private market rejected it after they did their own testing. However, they didn't say why, and they kept that under wraps for decades. At least the FDA was public and open about the reasons that they rejected it.
Wow. Appreciate the call.
Thanks for the debunk.
Hey, thanks so much, Sam. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Let's go to the IMs. The beginning and the end. Sam, you hapless dick biscuit. Is that like a colloquial term?
I just was, well, I mean.
No, I'm not blaming you for laughing. I'm trying to figure out what that means.
No, I just found it particularly poignant.
Yeah. Compound swearing.
I figured, given what a bumblefuck you are at hosting the show, you must then have some sort of talent in perhaps another field. However, after watching some stuff from your comedy career, I'm now sure that they've been hiding something that have been hiding something all this time. And I'm not talking about the 36B man tits you're hiding behind that shirt. I'm saying that as sure as you are at this very moment sitting on a shriveled pair of unspeakably disfigured raisin nuts, you are indisputably the most haplessly untalented bucket of emulsified mediocrity in all human history. Well, they always say be a superlative. Anyway, I love the show and wanted to ask, where do you get your ideas from?
Do we know the identity of that wonderful IMer?
No, I don't. I mean, I could take a guess, but I'm not sure. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? I don't think it's this guy.
Hey, this is Ronald Raygun.
Yeah, I know.
I was raised in the Mormon church. I had a professor at BYU who, my New Testament professor, actually, they make you take a bunch of church classes. He put up the Mormons hate the label cult. They think it's, terrible, but he actually went the other way with it. He put up, the defining characteristics of a cult on his PowerPoint and said, see, like under this metric, all religions are cults. And so, I guess we're a cult, but so is everyone else. And that's sort of the story they told themselves, at least in that class. And actually, like the MLM Mormon thing is, you should do a show about that sometime. It's very, very pervasive. Actually, when I met my wife, I was working at a call center for an MLM company called New Skin, and she was working at a call center for an MLM company called Haitian, and they're both basically garbage companies.
And then what do the companies do? They had like a social, and you guys meet in the in the commissary or the parking lot, and like, hey, trade secrets.
No, this is a story of forbidden love, because they were competitors. They each had, Steve Sinoni was selling a magic noni juice, which cures, all problems, health related and otherwise. And so New Skin, which focuses on skincare products, they came out with some sort of Chinese fruit juice thing, like some fruit that you've never heard of, that also cured all ailments. And so, but the connection, the overlay there between, the founders of these companies are also, they tend to hold leadership positions in the Mormon Church, and they capitalize on the prosperity gospel, the idea that, if you just work hard enough and you're righteous enough in your personal life, then you'll be successful financially. And they're very, highly unethical in terms of their sort of practices. They encourage people to buy cars that they can't afford to sort of project a higher level of financial stability than you've actually achieved.
Fake it till you make it, my man.
Fake it, exactly. So anyhow, it was a good.
Well, wait, how did you and your wife meet each other? Just because you were working for call centers? I don't understand.
No. I'm just saying that was a coincidence. I'm just saying that we both happened to be working for MLM companies, not out, doing the, pushing the product, but just taking orders on the phone. But it's such a huge part of the economy in Utah Valley, around the Provo area, up through Salt Lake, that a lot of college kids and other people end up working in that industry, because there's so many of these different companies. It's just a huge part of their economy.
May have to hear the story of how you met your wife.
Right. Again, you have a
really great phone voice.
It was forbidden love. She's working at the other. She's working for the Capulets.
I get a West Side Story remake.
I'm the sophisticated
Different
one
groups
who does
of
the original text of Romeo and Juliet. But
well, all right, but the West Side.
Right. What if they find out about us? They'll never let you sell noni juice to people in fucking Russia again, or whatever.
When you're a noni, you're a noni all the way.
There's a really good show starring Kirsten Dunst called "On Becoming a God in Central Florida." I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it.
Oh, that sounds good.
But and it got picked up, but then I think canceled because of COVID. But first season's really good. It's about a multi-level marketing pyramid scheme sort of thing, and Kirsten Dunst sort of tries to become really active in it. And it really, this country is really set up to cultivate that sort of predation.
Appreciate the story. Ronald Raygun, just give us my understanding is that on Friday, a judge enjoined the Biden administration from using Title 42. Are they able to continue to deport, and I know I'm not using it in the legal sentence, but literally to deport the Haitians in Texas under Title 42 because that is under appeal? Is that what's going on?
Oh, I'm not up to date. I am driving to court today, so I haven't had a chance to read up on that. Sorry.
All right. Well, it's good that at least you're, spending your time worried about your clients as opposed to calling into a talk show or something. So.
Wow. Okay. Hey, you know what? My favorite moment from the show today was when Mindy doubled down on her gypsy slur by saying, "They're thieves. They're thieves, though."
Appreciate the call. Yeah, he hung up right after he said that. Oh my God. All right, let's go to clip number 7. This is the Jake Tapper show. He's got Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves on. Mississippi has been a disaster in terms of COVID. I don't know how many thousands of kids who have gotten COVID in Mississippi at this point. But here is Jake Tapper just sort of rattling through Mississippi's COVID statistics.
Okay, Governor.
It's outrageous.
Governor, if Mississippi were a country, you would have the second worst per capita death toll in the world. And I'm saying, are you going to do anything to try to change that?
Jake, as I mentioned earlier, deaths, unfortunately, are a lagging indicator. Our total number of cases went from 100 to 3,600, and over the last 2 weeks has declined. They've been cut in half from 3,600 to 1,800. When you wanted me to come on 3 or 4 weeks ago, you want to talk about our number of cases. And then you want to talk about our hospitalizations. Now you want to talk about a lagging indicator, which is sad and it's
I'm trying
horrible.
to talk about dead Mississippians
My heart
is what I'm trying to talk about.
all 9,000 Mississippians that have passed away. But let's put this in perspective, Jake. I mean, the reality is Mississippi accounts for 1% of the U.S. population. We account for 1.1% of the total number of cases in America, and we account for 1.29% of the total number of fatalities in America. And so the reality is the Delta variant is very transmissible, and it is moving around the country. If you want to talk about cases right now, talk about Kentucky or West Virginia or what's happening in North Carolina or moving into Southern Virginia.
I'm asking you about your state, but I'm not going to ask you about West Virginia or Kentucky. I'm going to ask you about your state, and I'm just
Yeah, what are your opinions as the governor of Mississippi? Just like, why don't you opine on, you know, Idaho for a second? What do you think? You like the climate there?
So demented. Well, I mean, honestly, the idea, like, I'm bragging. Hey, man, got 1% of the population and only 1.29% of the deaths. So we're just more or less in line with where we should be.
Which is like a toupee, that guy is.
Yeah, like that just says like the whole country's kind of doing really crappy and you're just doing a little bit worse, more crappy.
I'm just doing a little bit worse.
And it was such obviously cherry-picked data to make it like look not as terribly as Tapper lays it out for him as, which is the reality. They are, you know, Mississippi leads in a variety of categories that are not good.
That really is stunning. It really is stunning.
I just don't know how, like, some of these states, you compare the death rate that in a state like New York, where we've had another spike in cases, and then just no spike in deaths really to speak of at all.
Yeah.
Because they're vaccinated.
Because they're vaccinated. And maybe other mitigation stuff too. And like just the comparative governance of that.
And we should be clear too. We're talking about month 15, 16, 17 into a pandemic. This is not March 2020. It's COVID-19. We've had it for a year and a half. And the idea that they're just like, well, you know, we're consistent with everybody else, more or less. It's just psycho.
It's also just a function of Tate not, I forget his last name now. Reeves. Not having faith that he won't face political ramifications for it, and that, like, the state will remain red, and there's really, I mean...
Abbott, apparently, his polling numbers are not doing so well, because apparently when you have... when your lieutenant governor is out there going like, we can afford to lose some of our old people, and then you actually do, people start to go, hey, wait a second.
Yeah, but the thing in Mississippi is that at least in Texas, they have a semblance of a Democratic Party.
Right.
The Democratic Party infrastructure has abandoned Mississippi and other states like it, and then you just like leave people to die, literally, from Republican leadership, and this is the reality.
Let's just play clip number 6 too. I love the idea that like somehow protecting workers, like an OSHA requirement, is somehow an imposition on workers.
Well, the Mississippi legislature has enacted laws, Jake, and again, thanks for having me on today. The Mississippi legislature has enacted laws for many years regarding vaccines of many types. It is unique to kids and their ability to go to our public schools. It's not vaccines mandated in the workplace. But the question here is not about what we do in Mississippi. It's what this president is trying to impose upon the American worker. The president very much wants you and everyone else to believe that this is a fight between politicians. The reality is this is an attack by the president on hardworking Americans and hardworking Mississippians who he wants to choose between getting a jab in their arm and their ability to feed their families. And I just believe that's a false choice. The president does not have the authority to do this. He knows he doesn't have the authority to do this, in my opinion, but he wants to change the political narrative away from Afghanistan and away from the other issues that are driving his poll numbers into the ground and focus on anything, particularly a political fight, other than those issues.
He literally has the authority to do it. The Supreme Court ruled in 1905 that you can mandate vaccines, but whatever.
And we'll see the outcome of like the lawsuits, which he's going to win because of that. But the idea that, I mean, I would love it if the American public was interested in Afghanistan. The American public has not been interested in Afghanistan for, as far as I can tell, I don't know, 18 and a half years, 19 years. They haven't paid any attention to it. That's just the reality. And the idea that Biden is trying to shift the ground from that, you know, like as if it's like, I mean, according to this guy, if you're only 30% more deaths than you should be at if you compare yourself to the rest of the country, which incidentally is also not comparing apples to apples because you've got 16 months to prepare for this. This guy doesn't think like the deaths of Americans are maybe what is at the forefront of people's minds, as opposed to like, you know, Afghanistan, which the American public has been ignoring for 18 years. Yeah,
so Mississippi has something like 9,000 COVID deaths, as Tate said. South Korea has 2,400.
Unbelievable. Really unbelievable. Here's Brian Kemp talking about he's the governor of Georgia. You look up how many bus drivers have died in Georgia just in the past like 2 months. School bus drivers. Look up how many kids have died. In the meantime, we'll play this clip. He's on Fox Business News. I don't know, just making up, reaching for stuff. Play this clip.
So we've had vaccines for measles, for polio, for smallpox, for swine flu. How is this different?
Well, I think it's different in a lot of ways because it's so new. Even though it's very safe, it's very effective. We know that. I believe that. There are people that have doubt that's out there because they haven't been all three fully authorized yet, and then mixed messaging out of the Biden administration. And plus, just like the AIDS vaccine, mandating it didn't work. It only worked when they started educating people why it was a good idea. That's what we need to continue to do with the COVID vaccine.
We've got Biden.
Well, if all three haven't been fully authorized, and that's the big, like, I guess, hill that you have to climb, one has been fully authorized. So just push that one. That's truly your agenda.
I love the idea that he's saying, I just want to make sure, you know, I want to be able to go on record as saying it's completely safe and it's a no problem. But just people get a little bit nervous because only one of them has been authorized. We should also say the AIDS vaccine mandate did not work because there was no AIDS vaccine mandate, nor was there an AIDS vaccine.
Yeah.
Georgia has about 23,767 deaths, which is roughly equivalent to Malaysia.
I like this proportionality that you're bringing in.
And kids were, you know, Georgia was trying to hold back on mask mandates. They have spread significantly because when they first got back to school, you know, look back in early September now, kids were getting COVID left and right. And like I say, three Georgia bus drivers died of COVID. 2 school bus drivers and 1 bus monitor.
I think I saw a story that they were looking at the National Guard to start driving buses in some states.
That was as of September 7th. I have a feeling there's a lot more masking going on.
Oh, they're welcoming the National Guard into the South now to drive buses. Sorry, a little dark. The one thing I want to cover is that Al Jazeera report from the Rio Grande.
Oh, yeah. This is horrific. So we talked about there have been several thousand Haitian immigrants, refugees who essentially were living under a bridge at the Rio, at the Rio, like somewhere near the Rio Grande River.
Right. Which is, well, at least this is where this report takes place, but there was a bridge in Texas.
A bridge in Texas, and at Del Rio, Texas. And I think they were brought there by, was it by ICE? The point is that my understanding is that the order by the federal judge that Title 42 cannot be used by the Biden administration has been appealed, and so it's not the enjoining of the use of that rule is not in effect. Title 42 was basically an emergency COVID provision, which the Trump administration started to use to immediately, without any type of due process, deport, which I think is probably the wrong word because it's not a legal proceeding, and that it's not legally deportation, because deportation requires a process. This was just basically expulsion. As soon as you get immigrants, you can expel them, regardless of giving them an opportunity to go through the system and apply for temporary protected status, which is a big issue for Haitians.
Asylum in general, which is like what we're supposed to be doing under international law and United States law, allowing for that to happen. 9,000
Haitians who were being held in this staging area under a bridge. Remember that Haiti has barely recovered from the earthquake from over 10 years ago. There was another earthquake over the summer just after the assassination of its president.
And then a tropical storm. Days later after, over 2,000 thousands died in this earthquake. Then the threadbare shelters that were in existence were decimated by the tropical storm. Every reason, and political unrest, every reason to seek asylum in the United States, let alone the fact that our destabilization and our interference in the country for decades and decades is a huge part of that. Haitians have every reason to seek asylum in the United States and every legal authority to.
And if the argument is that this country cannot absorb 9,000 Haitians, how is one of the poorest countries in the world that has been devastated by multiple natural disasters just in the past couple of months and a political assassination of their president going to do? But look at this clip just if you want to get disgusted and understand why our immigration system and policing is just repulsive.
This is how one U.S. Border Patrol officer received Haitian migrants crossing the Rio Grande, coming back with food to a camp they've set up in Texas.
Hey, you use your women? This is why your country because you use your women for this. You go.
But if you guys, he said there, I just wanted to make it clear, this is why your country is shit, because this is how you treat your women. I don't know.
Use your women to bring back food for their kids.
Almost runs over a kid with that horse.
Yeah. Oh, and they're holding whips too.
They're using whips.
Oh,
yeah, go back and watch what's going on here. Let's play this again.
Hey, you use your women? This is why your country because you use your women for this. You go, that way. Hey, no. No.
We've got our families inside, dying of hunger. We've had to go out to buy food.
No!
You can see the tense scenes here. The Border Patrol are trying to stop people getting back into the camp after they went across to Mexico to get food, they say, because there isn't enough food for them actually there in the camp.
There's more than 12,000 migrants, mostly Haitians, in the camp that sprung up in Del Rio, Texas, over the last 2 weeks. They want asylum, but US authorities are overwhelmed. This is just the latest flashpoint in a months-long surge of people illegally crossing the border, and there's little in the camp for them.
Sanitary products? There aren't any. Food? There isn't any either. They don't give you anything.
We met Nicholas on the Mexican bank of the river, searching for food and medicine for his family. He hadn't realized until we asked him about it that US authorities are also now flying Haitians back home.
There's planes now going deporting people. What do you think about that?
What kills me about that is that everyone knows what we Haitians are going through. There's no president. Crime is high. Students can't go to school. There's no work. The economy is down. People can't put up with that. Deportation is not good for us.
Like many others, he said he'd suffered to get this far, on a journey through South America, past gangs and through a patch of jungle called the Darien Gap, notorious for rape and robbery. It was really difficult. I saw a lot of us who died, he told me. Now he's touched ground in his promised land.
Well, I mean, one, we should also say amazing reporting by Al Jazeera, but like, don't let that imagery leave your mind. I mean, that's the reality of our immigration system in this country. And so the Biden administration, oh, kids in cages, kids in cages. Well, what about sheriffs cosplaying as overseers with whips? What about that?
And we should say that, you know, the idea of doing this under the auspices of Title 42 is such bullshit because apparently they're testing everybody on the planes. So if you have the ability to test everybody for COVID as you are basically shipping them back to Haiti, it's I don't know. It's obscene. Okay. It's obscene.
And if they're seeking asylum, let them quarantine for 10 days. In like, I mean, give me a break. These are just like, you know, cynical excuses in order to not do the humane thing, not do what the basic duty of a nation with the amount of blood on its hands that the United States has. There's the baseline responsibility. The Biden administration isn't interested in it. And just because it's not like open cruelty that's proud of itself that we saw a few years ago, it doesn't mean that it isn't, you know, demonstrably awful in and of itself.
Let's go to some IMs. Sam's tight pants. Okay. Okay. This is a long one. I'm not going to read all of this. Hear me out. Big update this morning from Axios on the reconciliation fight. While the White House and Sinema's office have refused to comment, apparently Sinema says she's done with reconciliation entirely if the bipartisan framework doesn't pass by September 27th, confirming her and mods in the House are working together to get Pelosi to cough up a date for voting on the bipartisan framework and to gumming up the works in the Senate side, so that making it all through that date would be impossible. But here's what might happen. McConnell and company haven't blinked on raising the debt limit through regular order. While I don't know the mechanics or feasibility of this approach, Democrats' best bet of getting both bills done now, as well as avoiding a debt crisis, may very well be to shove the debt limit increase into reconciliation. That increase increases the pressure on mods and cements the reality that both the debt limit increase and the two Build Back Better bills will have to pass on party line votes. That may lock in centrists like Manchin. We may not like it, but this is very well may be the one path to both avoid the debt crisis and actually implement most basic parts of the Biden legislative agenda before the midterms. Potential upside, perhaps they can establish a date where Biden won't have to deal with this debt limit again. See Crampell for Twitter on an explanation of the mechanics of debt limit via reconciliation versus regular order.
See Rampel, I think it's okay. Catherine Rampel.
Yeah. So the only potential, and I'll walk through that in a second, but the only potential sort of sticking the spikes of that or whatever it is, or the spokes of that, is that it appears that they're not going to be able to get this reconciliation bill by the 27th. Now, personally, I am skeptical that the moderates, if they don't get their vote on the 27th, are going to refuse to vote for it again.
Call their bluff. On
October 10th. But I also, Pramila Jayapal said at least half of her 96 progressive caucus have stated to her privately or some publicly that they're going to vote against the bipartisan framework bill unless the reconciliation is brought here. I mean, this is the bottom line. This is how it works. The reconciliation bill needs to be voted on at the same time as the bipartisan bill because that is the only leverage that progressive have, and the Biden administration for that matter, and the establishment, the leadership of the Democratic Party have to force these moderates to vote for the reconciliation bill. They need to both pass at the same time. The moderates had forced Nancy Pelosi about 3 or 4 weeks ago. You recall, they were holding out to get a vote by the 27th with the idea that maybe the clock runs out on the reconciliation bill. But you can punt that vote. If you put in the debt ceiling limit rise, which you have to do supposedly by September 30th, but what will happen is, my guess is sometime in the next week and a half, Treasury will come out and go like, whoa, we've shifted some stuff around, and that won't have to happen until October 12th. I'm making up a date, but that's it.
But you say they can punt that vote. Moderates are now saying they're going to jump ship on reconciliation if they punt the vote. You can call their bluff.
But the problem is,
and you can shoot the
hostage. Moderates have is that they're not on board with reconciliation right now. So it's very hard for them to pretend that they're giving up anything. And so this is going to be a big stalemate, because the Biden administration may be willing to trade off some big pieces of it, or to make the whole bill crappier but look good. In other words, like, we're going to fund everything only 15% of what it is, so that it looks like we have a list of all the things that we're doing, but in fact, all those things that we're doing are garbage because they're not funded enough. But we'll see. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. It's going to be not. It's. I think we're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah, and this was the whole purpose for the centrists and moderates decoupling these two bills, right? They were able to create this bipartisan bill in with Republicans. They kept progressives out of the process. They got what they wanted out of it, and they had been saying for months that this was the strategy, really. I mean, maybe not explicitly, but that they were going to try to derail one of the tracks and use the bill that they only came up with the Romney types. And I mean, right now, like, I have faith in Jayapal's assertion that she's got, tens of members who are going to stand with her on this. But, it's a little worrisome right now.
Oh, yeah. Manchin is out there saying that they should punt to 2022. Meanwhile, understand there's going to be a lot of tax increases that are involved in this. It's all going to be on corporations and people making over $400,000 a year. But the Republicans are gearing up to run an anti-tax campaign. And so when you punt it to 2022, you're basically saying you're going to have to raise taxes in the middle of a onslaught of anti-tax stuff. This is going to be a really important time. I mean, the benefit of the centrists that they have is that they don't care about passing anything.
And Manchin knows, by the way, that if it happened in 2022, those centrists would not want to vote for a tax increase in a midterm election year, and thus it would kill it. That's why he says that. And then you have Sinema meeting with Biden privately, basically saying, threatening to throw a wrench in the whole thing altogether.
Let's take a phone call. Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Emma, what were you doing at 1:43 p.m. yesterday afternoon?
Watching
what
football.
I was doing was I was watching the beginning of the Justin Fields era.
Mm-hmm. I know. Is this
Chicago.
Josh?
Yes. You know where I'm from?
From Chicago?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. He didn't look that good.
We got the win.
You got the win. You're right. Joe Burrow threw 3 picks in a row, and you got the win. I know. My hopes for the first overall pick that we got from you guys likely dashed, but congratulations. I like Justin Fields as a person, so I'm rooting for him, although I despise Matt Nagy a lot.
Oh, yeah, I know. Anyways, and Sam, if you want to talk sports, 2 weeks ago I saw a wonderful walk-off win by the White Sox against your Red Sox.
Great.
In person, it's great. Lurie Garcia. Anyways, no, I'm calling in about the vaccine stuff.
Okay.
So I took my friend to get vaccinated like a week ago, who hadn't been. And I know there's like a lot of, and you talk about this whole sort of issue with like the mRNA, that like some people are skeptical of vaccines are reacting to. For what it's worth, and I would not call this person anti-vax. I mean, he actually has very good politics, and I think it was more just the fact that he wasn't vaccinated because, like, work, and then also he, organizing and actually getting it. But he did say he wanted the Johnson & Johnson because it doesn't have an mRNA technology in it, and that and it's not something that like necessarily you have to agree with. Because I got Pfizer, and I feel great. But that if you do have a vaccine skeptic person and you do want them to get vaccinated because you care about them, maybe push the Johnson & Johnson on them and see if they...
That has worked for me too, Josh. That worked for me too. Well, it was really the mandate, but where this person was going. But... like that in terms of just them finding that to be an acceptable option, the J&J is less experimental.
Yeah, because it's like a traditional vaccine more, I guess. Or, I don't know. But,
and I think the one shot for people who are naturally anxious and prone to conspiracy theories about this is something like they can just get over with.
Get over with, and also like if you don't want to have to schedule a second, like like it's one, you're done. And I've heard it's actually pretty effective against the new variant. Although there's been a lot of baseball. I mean, I know that baseball players got the Johnson & Johnson by like the majority of them, and there's been a huge like COVID. There's been a huge COVID outbreak in baseball among certain teams that have been hit the 85% mark. So. But I do know that some data said it's effective against the variant. But I think that's a good strategy because, it's tough for me. I have people I care about. I want them to get vaccinated, and I feel like waging a moral war on them is not effective in terms of getting them vaccinated. Presenting them with an option and then helping them do it. Like I literally drove this person to get vaccinated. While listening to you in the car, by the way, just saying, listen to your dolphin tones. It worked, and the mRNA stuff, especially because they have family members that are vaccine skeptic, that worked, and it is a strategy.
Appreciate the call, Josh. Good idea.
Cheers. White Sox.
Bye. Ronce. Watching Biden humiliate Scotty from marketing has been the best part of his presidency. Watching France start to pull the EU out of a free trade agreement with Australia has been less amusing. Jennifer from St. Louis. Thank goodness that Nabisco strike might soon be over. I want some of those Pokemon Oreos, but don't want to cross the line. Also, shout out to the app Hesitant Caller from Missouri last Friday. The app is great for live listening, and you're not alone in Missouri as a progressive. There are other of us in the state, believe it or not. Myocarditis. Myo is around, card, the heart-itis inflammation. Thank you. Myocarditis. Come shower with Crowder. Hey, Sam, I love you. Could you say the following sentence, preferably with a sexy voice, but your normal nerdy one is fine. All right, this is it. Check out my OnlyFans. I'm gay for play, for a good cause. Thanks, Sam. You're the best.
Wow.
Yep. Well, I mean...
It's a bad...
Just to clarify, was that the sexy voice or is that your normal voice?
Yeah.
That's my sexy voice.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. You couldn't tell the difference? Anarcho PMC. I'd love to hear the author's opinion of covenant communities, a la the one with Amy Coney Barrett was involved with. Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I missed that.
Elite Cults would be a fun book.
Mardinity is Sam's absolute best mispronunciation, like the sound of the sea. I really did an effort to do it right.
You also love the word
Mordinity.
too, which is like you say it a lot, and
Yeah.
yet you mispronounce it all the time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Modernity. Modernity.
Modernity.
Modernity.
Modern.
Itty. Yeah, I know. Between 101 and the 5, every Twitter feed is a mini cult. Just kidding. But really, the Twitter follower post relationship, I imagine, is somewhat similar to being a cult leader follower. Cough, cough, Jimmy, cough, door.
Well, I mean,
Jimmy Jor.
Cult, and I always think of it in terms of like culture, and you control the information that's getting in. And the way Jimmy Dore edits your name out of the mouths of guests, I think actually kind of toes up to the line.
Yeah, good point.
And also, it's helpful not to take any phone calls. Have no,
No outside voices.
Right. It's always snowy in Ottawa. It's mentioned at the top of the show, but all Canadians listening, if you have not done so already, go vote. With polling as it is, the Liberals will hold a minority government with less total seats than they started with. This is a golden opportunity to vote NDP, pick up seats and grow the left, trademark, in the House. The more seats we can pick up, the more the Liberal Party will need to get input on bills they table, as any large legislation that fails will trigger a vote of no confidence. On a powerful left, min-max those House seats and drag the government left. Ryan Cole, isn't capitalism just a cult worshipping the inanimate creature of the market? Certainly arguable. Can Jesus swim on land? 979. Iraq war vet confronted George W. Oh, we played that. Have you read my email? When it comes to looking at cults, I like Stephen Hassan's BITE model a lot. At least it's a very decent measurement tool. Fun half AM quickie. I don't know, Sam. Sounds like a lot of in-group language to me. Louis, if you're looking for a good reason to lighten things up, I can't recommend Jack Murkison's weekly Bird of the Week articles at Discourse blog. Such a great writer.
Is it about birds?
Oh. The Ligma variant. Which leftist program has been responsible for bigger idiots on the right? TYT for Jimmy Dore or Michael Tracy, or MR for giving the first big exposures to Tim Pool and Glenn Greenwald? Well,
how about it's a wash?
I mean, to be fair to us, one, Tim Pool was only on once, and that was not, I don't think that was terribly, hugely
Pivotal.
helpful to him. Yeah. Greenwald's trajectory, I mean, while it is the case, I think that we were very, the radio show was one of the earliest opportunities for him. Like, I think...
I don't think we were or I would doubt you were instrumental in, like, making him...
I wouldn't think so.
Was he Democracy Now! Or one of those outlets?
He was on Democracy Now! A lot.
He was on Democracy Now!, but he never worked there. No,
didn't work there.
No. I had him on my show back when he was at his own blog, Unclaimed Territory, and had just was about to write his first book, even. It's possible that he was on Democracy Now! Before then, but this is commercial radio. This is the first time that he had, like, really mass media. Walrus. Roger Stone got served live on air. Beto O'Rourke is going to run for governor of Texas. He almost won against Ted Cruz in the Senate race. It's obviously early, but do you think he can win?
No. He can raise a lot of money from people out of state, though.
Trumologist. The guest is denying they're in the Biden cult, but a trained listener will note that she dropped the secret code word malarkey. Kinda sus. Spiritual atheist. Examples of Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in the media are the 1984 Newspeak language preventing people from even thinking of rebellion, and the movie Arrival, where, spoiler, the alien language changes the human linguistics who interact with the aliens.
Huge spoiler. I love that movie. I just want people to see it.
Has that movie happened? Well,
yeah,
when did that movie come out?
For a few years. That's
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
All right.
After a
This is
couple
the
years.
second time I've been caught in like the uncouth position of saying that it's a spoiler, even though the movie's been out for a while. I'm wrong. I'm in the wrong. Spiritual atheist.
Sam's not here, man. Might not get asked in time, but can you ask Amanda about her thoughts on the Black Hammer, which is most certainly a cult of political ideology? Never even heard of that. Comrade Tony, for any listeners who want to learn more, Reverend Dr. Robert Evans did a 2-part episode on his podcast Behind the Bastards on Synanon that was super interesting, and he may be a good guest to speak in regards to right-wing cults and extremism. Zepunny. Sam, the linguistic subfield you are circling around is called forensic linguistics. It has sexy stuff like speaker identification authorship, think unibar letter analysis, but less sexy things like what you're referring to, legalese and how it gatekeeps. Interesting. Betsy DeVos. Could you ask the guest about her thoughts on the BITE model? Fierce deity. Just found out the Senate parliamentarian isn't even a constitutional long-standing position. It's only been around since 1935. Here's an idea. Don't ignore her. Don't fire her. Get rid of the position entirely. Yeah. We should also say that she, in particular, was an INS, which was the sort of precursor to ICE on some level, lawyer who would work on deportations.
It makes me feel so 1776 every time the parliamentarian is the news. Like, what do we got to deal with this bullshit for? You gonna get Black Rod out here too?
Exactly. It was a big story in my elementary school that my first grade teacher and some of the other teachers entered a team spelling bee and lost on the word restaurant.
Oh, it's a hard word for me.
Aurant. The A-U-R-A-N-T.
The cult. Like I say, we're going to get another bite at the apple. That apple will come from a fast-growing tree. There are 3 times as many words that don't follow the I before the E rule, then follow it.
Oh, wow. Really? Wow, then we should just completely remove that phrase from...
Or just reverse it. Casey, answer.
E before I, except after C.
Can you ask if the performative aspect of social media is an effective public sentiment changer? Why don't you advertise guests ahead of time to solicit questions like you did with Mark Allen Derry that time? I mean...
Because we've got a lot of other stuff to do.
I mean, it's hard to organize that. And with obviously with an epidemiologist, it's there's a lot of like news you can use in the middle of a pandemic.
Right. And we're like going from the material of the book that she wrote as opposed,
Exactly.
Very committed audience to have to read the book before.
There's a t-shirt with this on, I before E, except when your foreign neighbor Keith received 8 counterfeit beige sleighs from feisty caffeinated weightlifters. Weird. All those words have.
Vote blue. Someone who's just texting for the first time. Hi, Sam. I admired your detailed analysis and policy understanding. This sounds like a bullshit question to me already. I had one question related to passing bills, though. Sincerely want to understand, how is it that Manchin can block progressive bills single-handedly without regard for his base, but progressives can't block passage of military spending or any other corporate Dem bill, even though they are more in number and backed by their base? Well, first off, Joe Manchin comes from a state that voted for Donald Trump 60 some odd % versus Joe Biden at 35%. I got news for you. Joe Manchin is supportive of his base.
You want to make an argument for Sinema?
Sinema, I think it's a little bit trickier. I think she believes, I mean, again, it's 50-50 in Arizona. But they get more corporate money, and the corporate money doesn't want them to do this.
Yeah, the base for them is pharma companies and the National Restaurant Association.
Right, and so they get value for their base by having no legislation pass. Like they will lose their core brand proposition in terms of their value to their donors by letting a bill pass with provision X, Y, or Z in there. They feel like they can then blame the non-passage of that bill to people who are sort of somewhat like disengaged anyways. Like, what person in West Virginia is going to go and say to Joe Manchin, how come you didn't vote for the blankety blank expansion of this social welfare program, which that voter is already primed to be suspicious of?
Mm-hmm.
And whereas progressives expansion of Medicaid. Let's just say, I'm just using that as an example, but let's say the child tax credit. Payments of $300 a month to people per child. Universal pre-K. Any one of these things are positives that they want to vote for. So there's a structural problem when you have people who are perfectly interested in nothing passing, but feel some pressure to pass something, versus progressives who are desperate for anything to pass. That's the difference. Now, in this instance, we may see, and I hope, the progressives basically pull down the whole thing, the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill. But I mean, just contemplate this for a moment. Based upon the corporate media that we have, the predisposition of most people, now I don't think AOC is going to lose, but when they run against AOC, a good politician would be like, she voted against the bill that was going to fix the roads here, right? That's the bipartisan infrastructure bill. She voted against the bill that was going to add bus routes here. What do you say? What do you say at that point if you're AOC? Do you say, well, I did that because, and then you have to explain the whole thing? Because they weren't allowing this other bill to pass, which would have been also even that much better for you. So wait a second. You denied us an expansion of public transport because of a hypothetical? It's a tougher situation to be in. Now, with that said, I think they should. I think they should, and I think they can withstand it. I think the price for the Biden administration is higher. Question is, like, what will they do? I mean, part of the problem is an assumption that every Democrat cares about Democrats winning. Or that there's such a thing as Democrats. It's used so amorphously. It's, is Joe Manchin better than Jim Justice, just as an example, who would be in the Senate from West Virginia? Yeah, just in terms of the judges. But he's a problem. Same with Kristen Sinema. In the House, there's a little bit more latitude, but not much. Tips for teens. Little known test-taking secret. If you say you're a tantric numerologist, they have to give you unlimited time on the math selection of the SATs. I don't believe that. YouTube aglow. Did you know that YouTube promotes videos that are being reacted to more and more using their algorithm? Point being, when we progressives continuously react to their lame videos every few days, we actually boost the reach and visibility of the original video in the search results and recommendations. The flip side of that, of course, is that we end up in the feed of right-wingers, and we have an opportunity to reach a bigger audience. I mean, look, I lived in an era where Rush Limbaugh was able to rule the airwaves without any accounting. Nobody paid attention to him. When we were on talk radio, it's like, why are you talking about these people? Because you could argue that it in some way, gives them more success. But the bottom line is it's happening. They're doing this. They're reaching people. And you can just let it metastasize on its own. And also, you should know that a lot of those people get that reach because they're also juicing their numbers. And there's money there for them to promote their videos. So I don't know. It's an age-old question, but that's my sense.
But it's not like, it's like the thing in like ghost movies, like if you don't believe in them, they can't hurt you.
Right.
That's not this case with conservatives and media.
Trench warfare. So did you learn everything you needed to know to start your own cult? Will I get something? Maybe a Suns Out, Guns Out Sam Seder doll if I'm one of the first to join the cult? It's an idea. Champagne Communist. A good example of cult-like thinking is what's going on with the Barbs right now, a.k.a. Nicki Minaj supporters. That has been amazing. Emma knows corn. We're already baked into Sam's cake. Justin. Hi, Sam and crew. I'm heading back to school for nursing assistant tomorrow and to take this career path that to get out of the public sector. Can I get a shofar? Yes, you can. Also, the taxpayer, to me, seems like that loaded language. Boys will be boys. Love you guys. Left is best. All right. One final call of the day. Calling from a 267 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? You are the final caller of the day.
Oh, shit. Hey, Sam. This is the Psychedelic Quaker. I haven't called in a while, but...
okay. What's...
probably haven't called since before COVID started, but quick capsule review of my life. I got divorced, got hired by the United States Postal Service, and have been dealing with all this really annoying shit. But what I wanted to call in about was I got really annoyed with the CDC and Joe Biden back in July when he had his whole fucking... I call it, my friends don't like this, but I call it the mission accomplished speech.
Yeah.
Where he said that we no longer have to wear masks if we're vaccinated. And then the CDC had come out with their recommendation that federal workers no longer had to wear masks if they're vaccinated. So what ended up happening is with the United States Postal Service, we got a letter that said if we were vaccinated, we no longer had to wear masks. However, our management would not inquire about our vaccination status. So what ended up happening, as you can imagine, is everyone just took off their fucking masks.
Right.
So I'm immunocompromised. I take a medication for psoriasis. So as soon as that came down, I went out and bought N95 masks to wear because I was wearing I was double masking with like a surgical mask and then a loose fitting cloth mask on top of it.
Yep.
And then as soon as they came down with that, I went and bought a lot of N95 masks to bring to work. And then they didn't reinstitute the mask mandate. Even our union was against the management getting rid of it. But then our union also is pushing back against the federal mandate to vaccinate.
Right.
So they just reinstituted the mask mandate about a week or two ago. So it's very frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they did it too early. I think their thinking was that we can reward people with vaccines. We can
incentivize people to get vaccinated.
Incentivize people to get vaccinated, but also sort of bring some clarity because there's a lot of I think disingenuous voices out there. Maybe there's some others that are saying what's the point of the vaccine if we still have to wear a mask? Well, the point of the vaccine is that you have less of a chance of dying. And the point of the mask is you will add some inhibition to the spread of COVID. I would like to see more testing. A lot of the testing facilities around here have rolled up. It's harder to get tests, and you got to go buy a $23 home test. Every day, not every day, but at least twice already. And my daughter's been in school for a week. Twice we've already gotten notices from the DOE. There is COVID in the school.
Well, that makes sense. And I listen to Michael Osterholm's podcast every week. And one of the things he was saying is that there's no way to make schools safe. There's no, like you said on your program, the quality of masks isn't something that we're actively talking about. So children are being sent to school wearing all kinds of different masks. They're not wearing them well. And I don't have children. I didn't have children before I got divorced. I have friends that have children. And one of the things I thought was interesting is I'm not a big fan of China's heavy-handed reaction to COVID, but one of the things they did before school went back was that they mandated parents get vaccinated because they seem to understand that vaccinating parents is more important than children, because even though children can get it and the pediatric hospitalizations and stuff are going up, the negative outcomes are not as bad as they are with older people. And like, I think what you're going to end up hearing about is kids going in and out of schools with other kids, and they're in enclosed spaces for, I don't know, 6 to 8 hours a day, and then they're coming back home to unvaccinated parents.
Yeah, well, that's the concern. And it's also, you know, there's a lot of workers in schools who, I don't think there's a vaccine mandate, at least not in the context of New York. I imagine it's not the case in other places. I think it's more often than not, parents are giving it to kids. And then it's possible kids give it to kids, and then it goes home to parents. But yeah, I think it was a miscalculation to do that. I think they got out ahead of their skis. They thought it was over, and they didn't understand the concept of variants and whatnot. But it's also like, you know, novel coronavirus. It's also, a once in 100-year pandemic, at least.
Yeah.
Knock on wood.
And I've been talking to friends, and I'm like, I wish the Biden administration would do something to educate the public, because as much as a shit show as those press conferences were with Fauci and Bricks, because you never knew what the fuck Donald Trump was going to do, they provided people with some sort of like information, and it was obvious from polls that people trusted Fauci. And then they got in office and they didn't do that anymore. And it was like, what the fuck?
Well, my hope is it appears like the Delta variant, at the very least, the rate of infection in most places around the country is going down, or the rate of increase, let's put it that way, the rate of increase is going down. So hopefully that's burned through, and then, Well, that happened last year in the early fall, and then we went into the winter, and, that's when everything got really hairy because people were indoors. And the hot spots right now or over the summer are places where it's hotter and people go indoors because of air conditioning. So it's like, I would expect to slow down through September and October like last year, but even last year, because I'm immunocompromised and I was trying to date, once November rolled around, I'm like, well, I can't meet people at restaurants outdoors. I know.
I'm going to shut down dating. I'm just going to slam the brakes down because this is too risky.
Gotcha. All right, well, hang in there, man. Appreciate the call.
All
right, that's it for our calling portion of the program. I'm going to read a couple more IMs, then we're going to get out of here. The machines, Joe Biden presented George Bush a medal in 2018. 2018, I know it.
I remember that now, yeah.
Amber, Virginia. Hey, Sam and crew, grew up in Northern Virginia. Everyone knew about a local Christian cult. They would manipulate members if their families were thinking of leaving. Someone in my high school was disowned by their parents when they expressed distancing from the church. We all hated it, but it was just a fact in suburban Virginia. I've heard like the Q stuff is there's like another like level of Q that is very, very sort of like patriarchal and Christian-y. Prayer Friar Kowalski. Hey, Sam, what are your plans to celebrate Wednesday? Being equinox, everything will be perfectly balanced as all things should be. Enjoy the memes. Yeah.
Well, that's a Thanos reference, but...
Oh, all right. Didn't get it. Howdy, Emma, MR crew. Emma, your interview last Thursday resonated well with my friends. Your sports takes seem to be meeting people where they are and holding their interest long enough to learn some good takes. Do you plan on any more interviews like that, or is there a plan for Emma to have a sports talk like a few minutes each week? Feel that to be popular, and we should do that. Maybe. Sam, I noticed last week when the step-up basis was brought up, the talking point about farmers losing their farms came up. This was actually brought up to me a lot last year by my friends and family about the flaw in the plan, but as I told them at the time, there was almost 0% chance there wouldn't have been an exclusion for small businesses like family. Well, there was definitely, in Biden's thing, it was at least $1 million value exclusion. like family farms, which have always been given an exemption on this because of how catastrophic it would be. The same tactic used with the state tax. We'll get into the state-up basis. Maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. It's really nuts. Nolan from the Detroit suburbs. The cultish stuff seems to be a bait and switch. The person in the group acts really nice, and then you get to believe you have your best interest at heart. Then once you're in, you believe or act on stuff that would seem ridiculous to outsiders. I usually assume that people have motivations, and they can be good or bad, but I approach what people say with some mild skepticism. All right, 3 more. Dude Guy Pal, you cannot add a debt ceiling hike into the reconciliation bill. It had to be added to the budget resolution that was already passed through the Senate and the House. They didn't do that. Ooh. All right. Interesting. Ding dong. Spelling is mad dumb, yo. Okay. And the final I am of the day. Oh, this is a long one. Chris Burdick. Ronald Raygun's call reminded me of a thing I did in the 90s. I used to hang out with a group of subversive art punks called the Cacophony Society. Wait a second. I think I heard about these guys. One day we took a field trip out to the big Mormon temple in Santa Monica Boulevard. We were given a tour by a Mormon elder and brought into a room where we had a couple of young proteges and held a Q&A session. I imagine my group started off with a few softball questions, but it didn't take us long to dive headlong into a series of polygamy questions, one after another. Then I asked about a special Mormon underwear, and that snowballed into a series of questions as well. We could see the elder growing more and more frustrated with our line of questioning. His young assistants, on the other hand, seemed kind of amused. They all gave us a friendly send-off, though, including the elder. This might have been the closest thing I've ever experienced to having a fun time in church. The Cacophony, I remember Society. They would do stuff like go on a bus, like they would go on a bus route, and you'd be dressed in like either pirate outfits or like bunny costumes or clowns, but they would spread out over the course of a bus route. So like a clown would get on Maple in Main Street, and then like 2 stops down, another clown would get on, and then soon the bus would just fill up with clowns.
So it's like, yeah, like what do they call it? Culture jamming or like mob.
Yeah, there was stuff like that too, where you go around and you do like Prince for a day, where you would switch off and like somebody would go into a bar and then they like the rest of them would pretend like they were paparazzi and they would take pictures of the guy and stuff like that.
They got a Wikipedia. According to the self-designated members of the society, you may already be a member. The anarchic nature of the society means that membership is left open-ended. A cacophony events often involve costumes and pranks in public spaces, and sometimes going into places that are generally off-limits to the public. Cacophonies have been known to regale Christmas shoppers with improvised Christmas carols while dressed as Santa Claus.
Yeah,
damn, they got a lot of chapters.
I remember that stuff. That was and the thing is, it wasn't doing it for YouTube. You're just doing it.
Yeah.
There was no
as like catharsis.
Although it's kind of funny, like pre-YouTube, as like you do it and then there's like a story about it. Like
yeah, but even rarely. It's just like a couple of photos you see maybe or something passing on. I mean, that was the era. Like we did for the Comedy Lab. We did a show at like the best of Boston at the Wang Center, and me and Benjamin and this guy David Waterman, there's a couple of us, like 3 or 4 of us. I made fake headsets with like a sponge and just a coat hanger on like and we would cordon off areas in the whole like thing for no reason. No one who we were doing except for us. All right, folks. Matt, Bradley, Emma, great job today. See you folks tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost